Hi, folks. Very excited to be with you today again for another webinar in our series of Unlocking Momentum webinars. So this is a very timely one and very important as we're seeing a lot of course, more and more activity in the AI space and a lot of our clients as well as other companies out there in the world that are really starting to get into this much more deeply as AI tools advance and become more prevalent. And so this topic of AI transformation from experimentation to strategy is a good one. Really looking forward to diving into this with you in our brief webinar here today. So try to keep these, if you're new to this, try to keep these to about 20 minutes or less, making these very easy to tune into if you're on your lunch break here on Eastern time, or if you're listening to the recording later. Give you an easy chance to listen to these very quickly, take a few tidbits from it, start some conversations at your companies, and then hopefully tune into the next one. So slowly pop up my slides here. We'll go from there. Uh, so first off, AI transformation. As we think about this, we see a lot of organizations that are jumping into AI, but just doing it sort of ad hoc, all over the place. And I wouldn't really call what they're doing a transformation. It's really more trying tools, trying AI tools out. A lot of people are doing their own thing, maybe using different tools. Although we do see some organizations that are still hesitant to let their people try those tools internally because they're afraid of the risks, or they don't have the right governance or policies in place or security protocols and things like that to make sure that their data doesn't escape out into the wild. But for those that are using these tools, we want to go beyond that, and that's why we're talking about this today, going from experimentation and just trying things out, sort of Wild West style, ad hoc, to something more strategic that is of benefit to the actual business. So that's what we're going to get into today here. So it's April 14th, 2026, getting into this topic. So we've been working with a lot of companies over the years, and we've been doing a lot of agile transformation for these companies. What we're getting into now is a lot more of blending that with how do we use AI to go further into agility. And we'll talk more about that here later, but I've been watching a lot of things myself and some of my peers and mentors who are agile coaches and trainers out there in the world, and finding a lot of similarities in the work of agile transformation and AI transformation. But so getting into this one though, why AI efforts often will stall or become very challenged. Very exciting at the start, of course. We're trying new things, trying tools, seeing how fast we can do, small things, getting answers to questions, or working through a problem, or in some cases simply like helping to write emails and responses and things like that. But a lot of times what happens is we're getting stuck in experimentation mode. We're just trying, but not really make it to the next step, which is to really do something meaningful. So we have a lot of times, of course, is just a bunch of disconnected pilots, and use that term loosely, pilots, where it's just someone trying something, right? Oftentimes I'll think of a pilot as like we have a hypothesis or something like that we're trying to prove out. But in this case, it might just be, hey, I've got a problem, I'm going to solve it right now, and I'm going to just try something. I'm going to throw something in ChatGPT or in Copilot and just see what happens. And so what we're not getting there is, of course, measurable business impact. It's really just we're dabbling, we're trying things. It's not bad to do these things, but are we getting where we really need to go ultimately from a strategic and company and business value standpoint? So that's the problem we're running into a lot of times. And then if we do go beyond that sort of pilot and just dabbling, we're trying to put something together more cohesive. Oftentimes we're not prioritizing, right? We're just saying, hey, let's take the simplest thing we have in front of us and try to solve that. And so lack of priorities, lack of clear ownership about who gets to make the call on certain things. Of course, if you're familiar with Agile, been following us for a while, we're big into Agile and Scrum and Kanban and things like that. And so having ownership by a product owner or a team of people who have clear ownership is really important. And so, really treating AI as maybe a project, if that, oftentimes just pilots, people are just running around doing stuff, right? And so, of course, that's not a transformation. The goal, right, is not necessarily transformation, but the goal is to get business value from these things. And so what that requires really as we go through this is really thinking about this in a different way. Instead of just dabbling and experimenting and doing ad hoc stuff and just running around in circles, we want to turn this into something that's more long-term sustainable and drives business value. And that requires us to start thinking very differently. And that's when we start using the word transformation, a transformation of the way we're thinking, transformation of the way we're doing things today. So the big part here, the big takeaway from the start of the conversation here is this is not a technology problem. The AI tools are there and they're getting better and better every day, it seems like. We can have new capabilities, new opportunities, things are getting faster. It's not a technology problem at this point. It's really an operating model problem for the organization. Operating model in terms of how we're structured, how we make decisions, how we prioritize things, how we organize work. And so it's an operating model issue that's just become more enhanced by the speed of AI, right? We can start to see that there's an operating model much more clearly because in previous times when we didn't have these tools operating so fast, things could sort of be hidden, tucked away in a corner, and we didn't really realize what the true problem was. But things moving so fast now, we get things accomplished quickly. Now it's a matter of, well, how do we organize those things and structure them in a way that really makes sense for us to work together for the benefit of the organization, for our customers, for the business, all those things. So it really does become an operating model problem for the organization. And so really starting to get into that mindset and that way of thinking, then it becomes a transformation of the operating model to get this to really work to the maximum benefit, right? So problem and misunderstanding AI, oftentimes what we're doing here is treating AI and what we're doing as just another project like we traditionally have in a lot of organizations. And we start treating things as complicated problems to solve rather than complex problems that require adaptation. And so again, if you've been to any of our classes, we talk a lot about this because if we come from a traditional standpoint where we can use things like waterfall and be somewhat predictable in terms of how we organize the work at the start in terms of projects and getting people together to work on it, we often will treat those things as a complicated problem where it's just a matter of getting smarter and trying harder, right? And so there's more of an opportunity to try to plan and control things if we're in a complicated problem space. However, most of what we're dealing with in most companies, especially when we get into IT things where we're dealing with dynamic business problems or dynamic customer problems, it really is complexity, right? It's not complicated where there are just more moving parts like a clock. It's really a complex situation where it's an organism, a moving and adaptive system that we're trying to deal with. And so in that case, you can't deal with those problems the same way. If you're dealing with a complicated problem, it's more about building experience and expertise, deeper learning, right? Studying harder, that kind of stuff. That's how you solve complicated problems. There is an enormous leap from there to solving complex problems, which is not about being smarter. Right? Solving complex problems is not about being smarter. It's not about deeper book learning. It's not about organizing the pieces better. A complex problem, we have to take action, right, and respond to change. So it's really an adaptable approach where we really have to try something because the problem is moving and changing so fast. We can't pin things down in the same way we can with a complicated problem, where it's just sorting out the different pieces and parts and trying to put it together effectively. In a complex situation, things are always adapting and changing. And so we have to respond to that through adaptation and changing our approach as well. And so the reality of it is that when we're solving problems with AI, it's because we're probably trying to solve complex problems that are difficult to solve. And we need to move through those problems quickly because we want to get through the problem as it stands today before it changes again tomorrow, that kind of stuff. So really the approaches in traditional sort of project management and what I see in a lot of maybe rudimentary agile transformations or agile adoptions is that we're still operating in that complicated mindset of just trying harder and trying to be smarter instead of actually being dynamic and taking action continuously and then getting feedback loops going and continuing to solve the problem over and over again. So of course, that shift that we're looking for to make this really effective for us in an environment where we're starting to adopt more and more AI capabilities and use those for the benefit of the business is to switch from trying to be predictive and controlling to really having that mindset of more experimentation and responsiveness. And so the experimentation is great. We talked about that a little bit on the previous slide, that we don't want to just do experimentation, but we need to do some experimentation to get the ball rolling. And the responsive part is then taking action and putting it in place. So it's not just experimentation, it's implementation quickly, and then going to the next experiment and implementation. So it's this cycle that we need to get into it. Instead of constantly just piloting, we're experimenting, getting feedback, and then implementing quickly what works and not implementing what doesn't work, and then trying again, and just doing that over and over again, iterating and iteratively approaching this problem so that we can be effective with it. So moving from experiments, then going beyond that and being just, trying pilots and experimenting to being more strategic about it, we want to move on from just trying things and not really organizing it, not really having an understanding of who owners are, moving from this Wild West mentality into having more clear and strategic approach to it, where we actually figure out what are we trying to accomplish with AI, what are the areas where this is going to make most sense for us, and then starting to actually place bets on it, right? Instead of just Wild West ad hoc, do whatever you want and try to learn stuff. Again, that can be beneficial, but as we move on beyond that into strategic approaches, it's really being more about what business problems are we trying to solve more quickly or more robustly, or trying to take some of the energy and effort out of it. And so if we have more clear identified opportunities, then we can actually prioritize those and see what are the top couple things or handful of things at the top of the list that we think would be most beneficial for us to try to solve problems quicker and easier using AI capabilities. Then we define what those capabilities are. What do we need to put in place? And one of the big missing pieces here that we're seeing a lot is trying to just throw AI tools at stuff without having good data or understanding about how to govern those things properly, so that we don't run into risky kind of situations or issues where we start making, start implementing ideas based on faulty data or missing information, things like that, that's crucial to us, right? So one of the big things here is having our data organized enough that it makes sense that the outputs we're going to get are actually useful. And then having the tools in place to make sure that those capabilities are reliable, right? So getting clear business value targets and priorities, enabling us to do those things through the implementation of tools, technologies, and well-organized data or well-defined data. And another part of that, by the way, is as we get into regulated environments, we work with a lot of regulated industries in terms of pharma, healthcare, financial, insurance, all kinds of things like that. And so one of those big things, of course, is making sure you have your data classified in a way that it makes sense as well. So you start getting into PII, stuff like that, personal data, things that we have internal to the company that are maybe company proprietary information that we don't want to get out. So making sure things are classified properly, not just organized well, but classified so that we understand how the AI tools can and cannot use them, where they can go with them, so that we don't have any issues there. Once we have those in place, of course, then trying to align how we want to lead those things from a leadership perspective, how we want to make sure that those go into some kind of value stream or product capability, so that as we're solving those problems, we have the right pieces in place and we understand how we're going to lead those out into either a business solution internally or out into a customer-facing solution. So we know how to release those and when. So we're managing those from a product management and an internal leadership standpoint. So connecting those, starting experiments to enterprise value, long-term capabilities, things like that. So we have a vision for what's going to happen. So as we think about this, a big part of it for us is, those surface level actions that we can take. Again, going back to like pilots and experiments where people are just sort of running around trying to do stuff, and they might be learning some good things, but it's really surface level behavior. What we want to do is start creating a culture of how do we use these AI tools and things from a more strategic standpoint and build that into our culture about how we operate. Again, think about this operating model, but it's hard to shift culture, right? But what we can access more readily is the systemic layer and barrier around culture. So culture is sort of the way we are as an organization, and we might want to start shifting that in a certain direction as we go into the future, right? Maybe to be more competitive or more collaborative, things like that, and be able to use these AI tools for our benefit. But that doesn't happen overnight. What we want to do is start addressing the systemic nature of what we do in order to use these tools more strategically, so that we start building them into the sort of core DNA of the organization. And that comes through structure, policies, and metrics, right? And so structures are how we're organized, policies are the rules of the organization, and the metrics are how we measure what's going on, right? Measures of success and measuring problems and things. So to get this to work well and start shifting to sort of that more strategic approach, it really is a matter of addressing the systemic nature so that we can start building that into the culture eventually. So with that, the shifts we want to start making really get into these three major things. The leadership shift on how we manage and organize the whole organization about how we're going to go about this AI adoption, AI transformation. So moving from really just oversight, where we see oftentimes that oversight either takes the form of micromanagement or hands off the wheel and close my eyes and not pay attention. What we want to do is move from that kind of model into active change leadership, change management, organizational change management. And that's a crucial role for leaders going into the future, right? It's not about managing the tactical day-to-day stuff, but you do have to pay attention. And the way you pay attention is by leading, right? Leading change, especially. So getting into that more of a mindset of leaders being that kind of catalyst leader who's going to organize and actively manage change. Then we start shifting how we organize our work. So oftentimes we'll refer to this as our moving from projects to products so that we're organized into persistent value streams rather than projects that just start and stop, right? That's where you sort of get into that Wild West experimentation where you sort of treat things as a start and stop. I'm going to start trying this thing, and when I'm done trying it, it's over. What we want to do is shift to more of a product focus, that a product lives long term, and we're starting to build capabilities into the product and enhance it and improve it and add and remove features and things like that as we go. And so really shifting from that work organization from projects, temporary kind of start and stops, to long-term products that don't stop, right? They continue on and we keep enhancing and modifying. And then the last thing to actually get that working, so we're leading differently, we're organizing our work differently into products and value streams, but then how do we actually implement that? Well, it's shifting our teams from more capability silos, functional silos, into cross-functional types of teams that own the work and own the problem. So they own the ability to improve the product, right, by either adding or removing things, and those AI tools just enhance that. So having cross-functional teams that start to have AI team members, which probably take the form of agents and other tools and things like that that can help us build faster learning loops and then start delivering real business impact, real business value. So we're leading differently, we're organizing our work differently, and we're executing on that work differently as well with this new way of thinking. So for us, we organize that in this way with our Agile OS model, really focusing on how we organize the work around products and teams that implement that, but then supported by leadership and those leaders really focusing on change, being catalyst leaders who are visionary and organizing around the ability to change as leaders. So the functions of management start to shift pretty dramatically towards that kind of capability of coaches and mentors who are leading change rather than managing tactical work. We leave that to the teams themselves. We set up the right environment where those teams can be successful and starting to really transform the organization with the capabilities of AI in mind. So that AI operating model at scale starts to look something like this. We start to embed AI into our products. Of course, most products that we're dealing with now probably have some aspects of that AI, but we're starting to build more capabilities into them as well ourselves. And then starting to figure out how to continuously add value to these products in that sort of value stream or product type concept, and really focusing on enabling the business through technology and collaboration. So we start moving the IT organization as more of a partner to the business to help them work together better. And so getting clear prioritization of those as we start getting the IT and business people working together, then we start having more clear prioritization of use cases where we can start applying these efforts and capabilities through AI to really enhance and speed up the value delivery. And then really getting into feedback loops. So as we start implementing those things, we start getting feedback loops about what's working, what's not, what needs to change further, what things used to work, but maybe are less useful now that we need to take out of the product, right? So we start managing the product actively. And that operating model for how to do that becomes a very collaborative situation where leaders are thinking differently. We have teams set up for success and empowerment, and we're organizing things around products and value streams. So really, AI becomes how the business operates, not just within IT, but really as a whole organization where we're starting to collaborate across those functional lines to get more effectiveness, more value out of it. So some takeaways on how we move forward here. So identifying high value use cases, starting to form those cross-functional teams that are starting to use AI capabilities as part of their DNA, and then starting to move faster in terms of small iterations, implementing things, not just dabbling, but actually getting a solution, delivering it, and then getting that feedback loop going, checking and seeing what's useful, what's not, measuring that impact, getting the feedback loop going, and then continuing, right? Just continuing that cycle. So we start to expand those capabilities and opportunities based on what we're seeing that works or doesn't work. So key phrase here, don't scale AI, but scale what works coming out of it. So just like Agile, if you've been through an Agile transformation, the goal isn't Agile. The goal is the outcome that Agile enables. Just like AI, it's about what can AI enable us to do to think faster, execute faster, to get people together and organizing work differently so that we can start delivering at scale what works rather than just dabbling, right? So with that, thanks for tuning into the webinar today. Again, just short opportunities to learn a few things. Hopefully you got a few takeaways there and can go back and start some conversations in your organizations. And with that, I'll hope to see you again soon.